When dawn broke over Rome, the Colosseum was already stirring. Its towering arches drank in the first faint rays of light, while the stains of yesterday's violence clung stubbornly to the stone, dark and heavy like ghosts that refused to fade. Beneath the seats, merchants shouted for attention, their trays overflowing with olives and diluted wine for a crowd still pouring in. Behind the iron gates, handlers forced half-starved predators into place, lions with their ribs showing, elephants stamping in fury, panthers clawing at the bars. From the tunnels echoed the sharp ring of steel, no practice swings, but the testing of blades meant for killing. Above it all, a low murmur began to swell until it broke into a thunderous roar. Tens of thousands of Romans surged into their seats, hungry for the empire's greatest invention, death dressed up as amusement. For Rome, the arena was never just sport. It was a system, a calculated instrument of control. Emperors flooded the sands to reenact sea battles, starved beasts to build suspense, and forced captives to perform myths that ended in genuine death. None of it was random. Every cheer in the stands was a declaration of loyalty, an echo of power reverberating through time. Today, we step into that same shadow, to witness the most savage and merciless spectacles that even Rome deemed excessive. From blood-soaked funerary rites to executions disguised as theater, we uncover how an empire turned agony into applause. The first gladiatorial combat in Roman history wasn't born from grandeur or imperial decree. It began with grief. In 264 BC, the sons of Decimus Junius Brutus Scaever honored their father not with marble or prayer, but with blood. They armed 3 pairs of slaves and set them loose in the Forum Boarium, the city's cattle market thick with smoke and stench. It wasn't entertainment, it was duty, a ritual offering to the dead. The custom reached back to Campania, where warriors were slain beside tombs to appease restless spirits. Over time, sacrifice evolved into combat. The dead no longer demanded random victims, but chosen men in honorable duels. Rome borrowed this tradition eagerly, for nothing displayed status like burying the dead beneath a spectacle of violence. But funerals were only the beginning. By the 3rd century BC, politicians saw how blood sport could serve politics as well as piety. Festivals once meant for the gods now included armed combatants. The Senate claimed it was an act of devotion, but everyone knew the truth. It was public manipulation masked as religion. Even the armor carried meaning. Fighters dressed as conquered enemies, the Samnite, the Thracian, the Gaul, each a reminder of Rome's conquests. Watching them bleed was watching the empire's victories reenacted stroke by stroke. Wooden platforms gave way to stone amphitheaters, temples to blood where thousands gathered to celebrate death. The games no longer belonged to grieving families, they belonged to the state. Every drop spilled into the sand whispered the same message. Rome ruled men, beasts, and even mortality itself. What began as a sacred duty transformed into obsession. Death became art, and cruelty became policy. The arena's roar wasn't only for men. Sometimes it rose for creatures dragged from the farthest corners of the world. Lions from Africa, leopards from the Caucasus, crocodiles from the Nile, giraffes from deserts so distant Rome had no name for them. They weren't marvels, they were prey. Romans called it the venatio, the hunt. It wasn't survival, it was domination made visible. When Julius Caesar paraded a giraffe in 46 BC, the first seen in Europe, the crowd didn't admire it. They watched it die. If Rome could capture the strangest beasts alive, then no world was beyond its reach. When the Colosseum opened in AD 80, Emperor Titus celebrated with a festival that slaughtered over 9,000 animals. Archaeologists later found bones etched with knife marks of deliberate starvation, proof that lions and bears were weakened beforehand to ensure a swift, bloody end. Even elephants, once the terror of Rome's legions, were massacred for cheers. Capturing and transporting these creatures was part of the show itself, a performance of power that began long before the gates opened. Every living trophy dragged to Rome was proof of empire. Some emperors turned these hunts into narcissistic theater. Commodus, draped as Hercules, strutted into the arena and personally killed chained beasts, pretending to be a god among monsters. The audience cheered, not from admiration, but fear. For in Rome, silence could kill faster than a lion. Meanwhile, nature paid the ultimate price. Decades of slaughter wiped out lions, leopards, and elephants from entire regions. The Colosseum wasn't only a monument of blood, it was an ecological catastrophe. But extinction didn't matter. What mattered was that the empire could capture life itself and destroy it for pleasure. To imagine a gladiator is to imagine balance, two trained warriors locked in fair combat. But that was rarely true. Rome thrived on unfairness. Many who entered the arena were prisoners, criminals, or slaves given wooden swords and no chance to survive. The audience laughed as they died. The weapons themselves became part of the drama. The retiarius with his net and trident facing the secutor with a helmet shaped to deflect the net. It was a living riddle. Who would trap whom? Suspense replaced honor. Blood replaced bravery. Over time, the games grew grotesque. Entire groups fought like armies. Women battled beasts, and armor was designed not for protection, but torment. Some helmets muffled sound or narrowed sight, so fighters stumbled half-blind while the crowd roared with amusement. Every match became propaganda. Gladiators dressed as Rome's defeated enemies fell again and again to remind spectators of empire's invincibility. Even gender became a weapon. Female fighters blurred boundaries but reinforced the same message. No one was beyond Rome's reach. By midday, after the morning's butchery, the arena changed tone. Combat gave way to performance. Condemned criminals became unwilling actors in bloody myths. Thieves devoured by wolves, arsonists burned alive, traitors thrown to lions. Each execution was a moral play, written in flesh. During Emperor Trajan's victory games, thousands of captives were killed over 100 days. The pacing was deliberate. Violence arranged like theater acts, each horror building to the next. Sometimes the condemned played roles from legend: Orpheus, Prometheus, Hercules, heroes turned into mockery. A man dressed as Orpheus might sing before being mauled by a bear. Another, as Daedalus, flew on waxen wings before falling to beasts below. Women were forced to reenact Pasiphae's cursed desire for a bull, turning myth into humiliation. Rome's stories became tools of control. Art became execution. Every scream reinforced the empire's supremacy. Not even its legends were safe from being rewritten in blood. Crucifixion, imported from the East, was staged inside the arena while vendors sold wine nearby. Others were coated in pitch and set ablaze. Tunica molesta, human torches writhing in agony. Tertullian wrote bitterly of these living lights. Such deaths were not random, they were messages carved into bodies. Defy Rome and die as spectacle. Not all Romans cheered. Some philosophers like Seneca warned that these entertainments hardened the soul, eroding empathy until cruelty became normal. But the mob demanded its fix, and emperors drunk on power fed it. Nero turned executions into theater, calling them art. Caligula, when beasts ran out, ordered spectators thrown into the pit. Commodus bled the treasury to stage his delusions of divinity. Even good emperors like Trajan celebrated victories with oceans of blood. As centuries passed, the cost of spectacle grew unbearable. Emperors bankrupted themselves chasing grandeur. Citizens, once proud of discipline, now lived for free bread and endless games. The phrase panem et circenses, bread and circuses, captured Rome's decay. By the 5th century, the Colosseum stood silent, its sands cold, its roars long gone. Yet its shadow remains. Walk beneath its arches today, and the air still hums with echoes, iron striking iron, beasts roaring, 50,000 voices demanding death. The ruins are easy to admire, harder to understand. They remind us how cruelty, when normalized, becomes civilization's undoing. The Colosseum was never just about blood. It was about control, a theater where power taught people how to feel, think, and obey. Every hunt, every execution, every myth turned to slaughter carried the same lesson. Empires that worship violence eventually fall to it. The stones still whisper that warning. Rome's applause has faded, but its echo endures.